So I saw John Wick 4, and to my surprise, I was blown away. Since this franchise began in 2014, it was kind of the revitalization of Keanu Reeves' career. He found this avenue that he could excel in, both physically and just exploring that area of his very limited acting abilities that actually fit his persona and the type of guy that he is. And you could tell he was passionate about it, everything. Nobody knew that the first John Wick was going to be a success until it came out, and everyone became obsessed with it to the point to where now, in 2023, we are at John Wick Chapter 4, and somehow the franchise is at an all-time high. With the price on his head ever increasing, John Wick takes his fight against the high table global as he seeks out the most powerful players in the underworld, from New York to Paris to Japan to Berlin. The movie was once again directed by Stahelski, who, if you didn't know, was a stuntman turned director. And since he's taken hold of this franchise, he's really used all of his past experience with the stunt world to inject into these movies to make them very authentic, make them as pure and realistic as they possibly can be, while as the franchise has progressed, things have more and more became sort of unbelievable, to the sense that John Wick has now become sort of a invincible character. He falls out of buildings, he gets hit by cars, bullets miss him by inches. And while this franchise has never been one that's been known for the great dialogue and writing, it has always remained true to the commitment of pushing the boundaries while also remaining somewhat authentic in its approach. And in my opinion, John Wick Chapter 4 takes everything in the previous films that really worked, it amps it up to about level 15, cranks it up quite a few notches, blows all of the previous sequences and set pieces that we remember that are the most notable out of the water, and it just delivers on a great story. It clocks in at almost 3 hours long, and there was never a point throughout the film that I felt like it was dragging, that I felt like checking the time to see how much was left in the film, because it just has such a brisk pace, and there's constantly something going on around you that you're never left with a moment to breathe and never left with a moment to relax, because as soon as one thing ends, the next thing begins almost immediately. And I will admit, after John Wick Chapter 3, I was feeling like the direction was hitting sort of a roadblock, like there was a cap on the potential that the franchise could live up to, because Chapter 3 in its entirety felt much more like style over substance. It got to a point to where I felt like the narrative wasn't progressing forward in a way that kept things interesting. It just sort of felt like very repetitive, like it wasn't really going anywhere. It felt more of like a chase without any sort of resolution or without any sort of conclusive ending. And really, John Wick Chapter 4 sort of confirms all of those thoughts and feelings that I had about the previous film, because within the first 30 minutes, everything that happened in the third movie is pretty much written off. It is reversed, it is backtracked to a way to where this film wants to pick up where the events of Chapter 2 left off. It's got something interesting to say, and it acknowledges the fact that Chapter 3 didn't have much to say at all, and I was incredibly relieved to know that they were getting back to the core of the franchise, not only the story, but also just the foundation of what it was supposed to be from the very beginning. The story is actually quite strong here. Not only is it great big action set pieces, but it's also got plenty of characters that are conflicted with their motives. There's a lot of threats here. John Wick is in this period of his life once again to where he's struggling to hold on to that humanity while also having to come to terms with what he is fighting for, and also realize that in the midst of all of this chaos, he has put many people he cares about in the way of danger, but that also motivates him to get to his final goal, which ultimately, from the beginning of this franchise, has been to be free from the high table, be free from this organization that is trying to take everything out of him, that he has all of these ties and these burdens to. And his journey to become a free man is very engaging, very captivating. This is still an action-first movie, but the narrative is what drives all of the action. And I really appreciated that. For such a big movie that was trying to up the stakes and be grander in scale than any of its 3 previous additions to the franchise, it held the narrative at the core, and that's what really made it work. Along with the stronger narrative at play, there's also new characters that were introduced that I think are some of the most compelling of the entire franchise. Bill Skarsgard plays the Marquis, who is the main villain of this film, the one who is really driving the entire conflict, and he is the leader of the High Table. He is the one who is going after John Wick to settle things for good. His motives, his scare tactics are very intimidating, and the performance given by Bill Skarsgard sells it so incredibly well that he is a very, very unsettling character. And honestly, to me, he reminded me of one of the better James Bond villains that you would get. The one who is very maniacal, but also has a reason behind every single motive, and you feel the threat. It was a very captivating character. But my favorite addition to the franchise has to be Donnie Yen, who plays Kane in this film. He is someone who is a friend of John Wick, who knows him, who has a long-lasting history with John Wick, and for the most part, they've been pretty close. But because of the situation he's been put in, and because of the things that are at stake for him to lose, if he doesn't track down John Wick, he has to put all of that aside. He has to put all of their history aside and still finish the job. And in the midst of that, you see all of the confliction with this character. And I felt like he was very fleshed out because you know he is going after John Wick, but at the same time, it feels like he really doesn't want to. And not only is he fighting with all of the people around him, including John Wick, he's also sort of fighting with himself, finding that inner reasoning behind doing everything, questioning whether it's worth it. It was just very compelling to watch because he's not just a one-note stereotypical villain. I wouldn't even consider him a villain. He wants to be an ally, but he's not able to be given the circumstances, and so it's just very, very complex for this type of character, especially within the franchise. I don't know that any character outside of John Wick has been given this much depth, but they give that to him. And so overall, his performance just really sells it for me. He's extremely charismatic, very suave. Not only that, his fighting styles, as you can expect from his previous work, are just top-notch, high level. He's a blind man doing kung fu with swords. He's doing stuff with guns. He punches people incredibly fast. It's like he's in a video game. Yeah, you see how many punches I just threw? He could throw that many punches in like a few seconds. It's insane. He's just the perfect match for John Wick, and I loved every bit of his character. Every solo moment, but also every interaction with John Wick. It was just simply incredible. But Jaren, how's the action? The action is unlike anything I've ever seen before. I mean, this franchise has already crossed boundaries as to what is capable of capturing on film. And not only the impressiveness of Keanu Reeves' dedication to making everything feel very real and authentic, and him actually being the one to do the majority of his stunt work, but I mean, come on, they fought on horses, they fought in cars, on motorcycles, there's been big nightclub shootout scenes. I mean, there's always something that is upping the ante with every movie, and this film said, you know what, we're just gonna do it bigger, and we're gonna do it better in every sense of the word. The film opens with this chase sequence through the desert, and then we get this big, long, drawn-out scene in Japan where they're all fighting with swords, and John Wick pulls out nunchucks, and it's not just a gimmick. They actually use it effectively, and he wields the nunchucks for quite a long time, and the things that he's able to do about it just feels so fresh and just so fun to see, and there's so many bullets flying, and it just feels like sensory overload. There's an entire car chase sequence that ends in a bunch of guys being flown around and crushed by cars, and John Wick getting thrown around and flying all over the place. He falls out of buildings onto cars, he falls out of more buildings onto concrete, and all I'll say, the one that most stood out to me, the one that I'm going to remember for quite a long time, takes place on a staircase. I don't want to say too much more than that, but it's a very long staircase. Very long. And it was glorious! Now, more than ever in this movie, it's really trusting that you have the suspension of disbelief, because as I was talking about in previous installments, things that happened to him as a human being, that even if something not even remotely as bad happened to any of us, we would die in an instant. It's got even more of that in this movie. And it can be distracting in a couple areas, like there will be big fight sequences out in public with a ton of people surrounding them. Like they literally go to a rave and there are people partying all over the place and they start shooting guns and they start throwing punches and they start doing this and that. And the people in this rave see it. They acknowledge it. And then they keep on dancing. If it was me, I would run, I would cry, I would call the police. But nah, man, that music was just too good. They didn't care. And it's hard to believe that in this instance, when there are so many fights being taken place, so many bullets flying, so many deaths, so much destruction, that there are no police or any sort of law enforcement anywhere around to stop them. But at this point in the franchise, I've just sort of come to expect it and come to accept it and realize that this is a movie not trying to deliver on 100% realism. It's trying to deliver on a great time at the movies with tons of brutal action in your face. And when you can't accept that, when you can't acknowledge that it is not real and it's not really trying to be, you're gonna have a good time, as did I. And I really admire the way Chad Stahelski directs, because as a person coming from that stunt background, he knows the importance of showing the stunts, showing the choreography, and really just exploiting every bit of the action for the audience to see. There are no close-ups, there are no straight cuts left and right away from the action. Everything is front and center, and that just makes it all feel incredibly visceral, feel more real. It makes you feel every punch. It makes you feel every bullet. It makes you feel every shot to the crotch. Goodness. I was hurting. They take pride in the fact that they make these movies look as practical and tactical as they do, and I really appreciate that as a fan watching these movies, that everything going on that they work so hard on is visible. Because too many times in blockbuster movies, there will be these big grand action scenes to where anytime a fight takes place, you can maybe see 50% of it. And also what I admired is that this movie ended with some sort of finality, that it actually had a conclusive bookend, that walking out of the theater, it didn't feel like once again I was left on a cliffhanger, or that I had to wait years until the next one to see how the movie was going to continue. It's got an ending that felt very right to the franchise, to this story in particular, and it tied it all up very nice in a neat bow, and made you feel overall very satisfied with the 3 hours that you had just spent watching this movie, and for the years dedicated to following along with this franchise. I can't wait to see what's to come with this universe, but as of right now, I'm very satisfied with the way it all wrapped up. So overall, I don't have enough good things to say about John Wick Chapter 4. My expectations were blown out of the water. I expected it to be good, but not this good. It really returned to the roots and the things that people held on to from the first movie. It had such a strong narrative, but also plenty of incredible action set pieces to back it all up. John Wick as a character felt like he grew immensely. The characters around him were much more fleshed out and had a ton of depth to them. The newcomers to the franchise, Bill Skarsgard, Donnie Yen, were great additions. And overall, I just had a great time following along on this journey and figuring out where it was going to end. I admire the dedication put into it. I admire the fun that you could obviously tell they were having while making this movie. And I appreciate that they didn't just phone it in, that they really put a lot of hard work into making this movie the best it possibly could have been. This is why I go to the movies, to see something like this on the big screen. God bless Keanu Reeves. So with all that being said, I'm going to have to give John Wick Chapter 4 a 9 out of 10.
Awesome. Yes!
So guys, make sure to comment down below. Let me know what you thought about this movie. Also tell me, what is your favorite John Wick movie in the franchise? Because really, there's not a bad one in the bunch. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, I'll see y'all later. Peace out.